But I do believe that Hannah Arendt is worth people reading because she's so honest, provocative, bold, fearless. She says what she thinks. I mean, in many ways, that's what I want to teach people, to say what you think. And I had to say, you run the goddamn Hannah Arendt Center, say what you think. And it's hard. I found it super hard, but I've pushed myself. And I realized how hard it is for me to get the courage to say what I think. And I figured, though, if I run the Hannah Arendt Center and I don't say what I think, I'm a fraud.
Over the past 2 days, we've been talking about or discussing about the possible relation between Hannah Arendt's political thought and East Asian democracies. And of course, that very question presupposes a link between, or a possible link between, and we are so happy to have Roger attending this conference. So over the past 2 days, and we've just finished. Now it's my turn to ask for some feedbacks. So Roger, how do you feel about this conference?
Well, it's my second time in Taiwan. I actually spoke here at the university 3 years ago. And I have to say it was both times, but this time especially, it was really wonderful. I thought the conversations today, yesterday there were some formal papers, which were great, and you gave one and I gave one. But today there was an opportunity for conversation. From my point of view, I talked a little bit about what I first called the retreat of politics and liberalism, which I think is an international phenomenon. But then the return of politics, and I offered different ways. And one is obviously right-wing kind of populism, or left-wing populism even. But another is renewed ideas of democracy. And in Europe and in the United States, there's a lot of interest in things called citizens' assemblies, something I'm very interested in, trying to bring everyday citizens into government. But one of the reasons I really wanted to come here for this conference on the East Asian dialogue around Arendt and democracy is because of in my view, real innovation and excitement across Asia in democratic forms. So in Korea with the candlelight protests and revolution, as they call it, and here in Taiwan, I know today we had this very interesting conversation, but at least in the United States, in the world I'm in, the former minister Audrey Tang is someone who's become incredibly interesting and popular, and this sense of what's GovZero and vTaiwan, and I was surprised in this conversation to see. I mentioned it in my speech as the American coming from outside, but not one Taiwanese or Asian speaker talked about that. And when I asked you and others about it, people were like, didn't even respond with it again. It's almost like it doesn't exist. And I think there must be a number of reasons for it. But to me, it's interesting to see, in the United States, we're worried, oh my God, Trump and pessimism, and in Europe you have the right wing in the Netherlands and in France and maybe in Germany and Hungary, and everyone's pessimistic. I get that. We're taught to be critical thinkers. We're taught to always be critical. But one of the reasons I love Hannah Arendt is she was someone who looked honestly at the world and was always clear about the challenges, and yet she believed in renewal. She believed in new beginning. She believed in revolution. And she believed you have to learn to love the world. And we just had a conference at the Hannah Arendt Center in New York on joy, loving the world in dark times. And to me, that's what Hannah Arendt is about, learning to love the world in dark times. It's not easy. But without joy, without hope, without some sense of belief, human life isn't possible. And so what I, what I took from this is there's a lot of critique and a lot of pessimism, but I still believe that there's what I see in East Asia and what I would is real democratic innovation happening, and that was very exciting to me.
But then, according to your observation, we scholars are much more, or perhaps too pessimistic and self-critical, and sometimes the society can be quite nihilistic as well, because relativism seems to be the norm in this society. As we discussed, we've got different camps and put things into totally different perspectives, and one history can be interpreted into so different narratives. So in this society, as you witness over the 2 days, then what would you tell us, or what sort of advice would you like to give us in order to have some, or in order to hold out some hope for for society or for our future studies then?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I mean, we live at a time after the death of God, if you want to put it in those terms, post-truth, if you want to put it in those terms. And there's a real question of where optimism and hope come from. And yet, I think we all know, we all feel in ourselves, there are things that give us hope. There are moments when we feel connected to something larger than ourselves. I don't know, I mean, for me, it can be skiing, but it also can be every once in a while, I go to a conference and I feel an engagement. I felt it today. And also just, there are very few politicians I like, but every once in a while I get involved in a political conversation and I feel like my friends have emerged. I mean, as you know, my new book coming out next year is on friendship, and I believe that there's joy in friendship. And to me, friendship is always between people who you respect, but not who you have to agree with. And that feeling of, I want to hate them, but I also respect them. And I love that I love them as a person, even though I sometimes am infuriated by them. To me, that gives hope. It gives me hope that we can create a world amongst people who are plural and different, who we disagree with, and still build a world together. It's not easy. And I think sometimes people look at we're so polarized, it's so bad. Look, the world has been polarized for 33 billion years. I mean, the Romans had the plebeians and the elites, right? The Greeks had the barbarians. I mean, it's not like the world is not usually polarized. The moments of unity are tiny blips in history. We all know this, right? And so the point is not, I think, to feel despair. The point is to say, all right, we're in a moment, we're in the usual moment now of return of politics. Politics means people disagree. Politics means I may try and beat you and you may try and beat me. But how do we build a common ground? And I mean, what Hannah Arendt taught us, is that the only way to build a common ground is not through violence, not through domination, but through talking, right? Talking to each other, talking societies. And what happens when you talk? She goes, well, I mean, one of my favorite lines, she quotes it, she actually uses it in 3 or 4 different essays. One is The Crisis Character of Modern Society, which I know is going to be published in the Arendt volume you guys are editing. She says that talking about justice and piety will make the world more just and more pious. One of my favorite lines in her work. I might not have gotten it exactly right, but it's there. Well, what does she mean by that? She doesn't mean just by talking about suddenly it's going to become just and pious. But she means that if you and I and we all disagree, and we talk about what's just, and you say just is China rules, and I say just, no, Taiwan rules, and someone else says no, Russia rules, and someone else, U.S. rules. Okay, we disagree. But let's all figure out where we agree, right? And instead of starting up here, we start here, and then we move to here, and then we move to here. It's from the bottom up. And that's the way you build a common ground, just by talking. You find where you agree, and it could be a very low level. I mean, in the United States, and I think also in Taiwan and other places, one of the biggest problems we have in politics today is everyone thinks on whatever issue, whether it's abortion or whether it's China, Taiwan, they say, on a scale of 1 to 10, the worst is 1, the highest is 10, I want 10. And if you believe something else, I hate you, or I don't agree with you. My view about politics, and I think this is Arendt's view of politics, you move from 1 to 2. And that's a big step. And we learn to build a common world and then live amongst people who disagree, but also understand what we share. And the truth is, even people who are pro Xi Jinping and people who are pro the Green Party here agree on more than they disagree on. And that's a remarkably positive view of humanity. See, we all focus on the negative. We focus on what we disagree on. But we actually agree on more than we disagree on. And Arendt always reminds us that the first step is to figure out where you agree. Then have conversations and try and build on that. And that's, to me, that's the way politics works.
All right. And as the director of Hannah Arendt Center in New York, and with ample experience of promoting Hannah Arendt's thought and teaching the public Hannah Arendt's the importance of Hannah Arendt's thought, what do you think we can do as Arendtian scholars or as Hannah Arendt scholars in East Asia? Do you see any possibility for the sort of international network in East Asia to emerge?
I think that's a great question, and the answer is yes. I mean, so you said I run the Hannah Arendt Center in New York. I mean, I've always been very cautious and wary and saying, look, my job is not to tell people what Hannah Arendt says. I mean, who am I? And you said something at the end of the session today, which I agree with, which is my job is to help people read Hannah Arendt, right? I run a reading group online with almost every week, over 100 people join together and read Hannah Arendt together. And then it's on YouTube, and then it goes on a podcast. But it's not me telling people what Hannah Arendt said. It's we read Hannah Arendt together, and we talk about it. Okay, I'm teaching, yeah, because I read her for a long time. But my goal, as I say at the end of every session, enjoy reading Hannah Arendt. That's my goal. Get as many people reading her as possible. Not because she's God or the Bible. She's not. She's a Jewish German refugee who became an American citizen and was a very brilliant woman. But I do believe that Hannah Arendt is worth people reading because she's so honest, provocative, bold, fearless. She says what she thinks. I mean, in many ways, that's what I want to teach people, to say what you think. She quotes Herodotus often, right? Say what is. And we live in a culture in which everyone's afraid to say what they think. Whether you're afraid because you live in a totalitarian society, and you're afraid people might turn you in or get you in trouble, or whether you're afraid you live in a culture of liberal social totalitarianism and you're afraid of being canceled, or whether you're just, what do I have to say? You know, I stay away from politics. I don't want to say what I think. I mean, when I started the Hannah Arendt Center, I often found myself thinking, I want to say something about something complicated, something controversial. I could get myself into trouble. And I had to say, you run the goddamn Hannah Arendt Center, say what you think. And it's hard. I found it super hard. But I've pushed myself. And I've realized how hard it is for me to get the courage to say what I think. And I figured, though, if I run the Hannah Arendt Center and I don't say what I think, I'm a fraud. So my goal is to come out and tell people what I think. Many people disagree with what I think, and that's totally fine. My view on life is that it's beautiful when people disagree with each other, as long as they respect each other and talk about it. And so, you know, my view in it's obviously a challenge in Asia because the language is so different. I think it's great that you're publishing her work. I mean, I know many of you have been translating her work, and I know there's a 4-volume work of her writings that is coming out. A book of my essays, Jackie Tai is going to, again, it's my essays, not Hannah Arendt, but it's an attempt to read Hannah Arendt about democracy and liberty, is coming out soon. So, what I would say is, this is what I tell everyone, the best way to promote Hannah Arendt is to give people a reason to and the ability to read Hannah Arendt, not to use her. I'm not about using her to make my point. I have my opinions, but if you look at the reading group that we run, I never tell people what to think. I'm very clear about that. People ask me all the time, it's not my job. My job is to help you think. And there's a lot of ways to help you think, but one way is to read Hannah Arendt, not because she tells you what to think, but because she tells you how to think. In her book, my favorite of her books, Between Past and Future, is called 8 Exercises in Thinking. And what she says in that book is, we used to have authority, the tradition, whether it was the Roman tradition or maybe East Asian traditions or Confucian tradition or whatever. And the tradition is carried over time, a traditio, right? So Roman tradition means to carry over. She says, we live in a time without tradition. Religion, God, family, customs, they've broken. She says the pillars of the tradition have shattered. And what we need to do is to learn to think. She calls it thinking without banisters. You know this, right? But she says we have to learn to think, because for most of human history, yes, okay, a few philosophers thought, but most people just followed the tradition. Well, we need to learn to think again. And she says the way to learn to think again is we need exercises in thinking. And she says these 8 essays in Between Past and Future are exercises. How do we think about authority? How do we think about freedom? How do we think about education? How do we think about science and artificial intelligence and the conquest of space? How do we think about the problem of truth in politics? How do we think about the crisis in culture? They're exercises. And I think of all of Arendt's work as one large exercise in thinking. Even The Human Condition, she says, all I'm trying to do here is to think what we are doing. It's an attempt to think. And so the way I teach Hannah Arendt is not to say, here's the answer, or here's what because I don't think she gives answers. I think she teaches us how to take the problems of our day and think them in a meaningful way, think them through. And my hope is that the people I'm teaching or the people I'm talking to will then go think on their own. And so to me, that's what makes her so addictive as a thinker. And the reason I keep teaching her over and over again. And I have found that when you teach her that way, people are inspired and they want to read more, they want to think more. I've been teaching this reading group for 13 years now, and most of the people in it, some of them have PhDs and are professors, but most of them are bankers, and one was a truck driver, but they just have jobs. They're regular, great people. But they know Hannah Arendt better than most Hannah Arendt scholars, as far as I know. Not just because of me, but because for 13 years they've been reading her. Why do they do it? Because she's exciting. Because she gives you this thrill of thinking. And if you can teach people the thrill of thinking, you've got them.
Wonderful. And the next thing we need is courage of her kind.
Yeah, wow.
Intellectual and moral. We hope we can cultivate that.
You're absolutely right. I think courage is one of the. As she says, the first political virtue is courage, and you have to have the. As I said, I had to build the courage to even say what I think, let alone do something. Right? It's not easy, and we live in a time in which we're taught to avoid conflict. We're taught to be generous, to not conflict with people, and I don't mean conflict. I don't think it's a great idea to kill people or simply to be an activist for activist's sake. The problem with activism, right, is that activists don't think; they act, and I think it's great to be an activist, but you can't be an activist and a thinker, I don't think. You can first think and then act, but once you start acting, you're no longer thinking. And so I think we need activists, but we also need thinkers. And Hannah Arendt was never an activist. She was a thinker. Well, it's not true. From the 1930s, she became an activist. And I think in extreme situations, she thinks that we all have to become activists. But in most situations, what we need are thinkers.
Okay, maybe then I ask the last questions. Yeah. So as you mentioned, as all we agree to, I think that Hannah Arendt emphasized the responsibility of a thinker, not just responsibility for a scholar or intellectuals. So what would you expect a thinker from East Asia will, in related to their particular situations, like we have been discussed last 2 days, what would you expect them to do, or what would you say to them?
I mean, so the first thing to say is we all have to think within our own world, right? I mean, Hannah Arendt is the thinker of revolutionary foundations. How do we have a revolution? A revolution is simply the founding of freedom. And what she says is the Americans were able to found freedom for two basic reasons. One is they had this fundamental experience of power that was something they experienced in their colonial worlds at home. And two, they got lucky. The Constitution became an authority, right? So there were, one was experience and one was luck. The Asian, every country has to come from its own experience. It would be folly for me to tell you in East Asia what to do. I mean, I think Taiwan has such, I know Taiwan better than many of the other countries because I've been here, but it has such a rich experience with, the indigenous culture that was here prior to the Japanese takeover. Then there's a Japanese culture, and then there's a Han culture, and now there's a new, interesting cosmopolitan culture that's emerged. There's obviously, and there's also a strong engineering culture. I mean, it's a very engineering-centric society, as far as I understand it, and computer-centric and very technological-centric, which is why I've mentioned a few times these vTaiwan. And I was talking to a young man who was at the conference who's not a scholar, who works in the technology industry. And he was saying, it's not true that people don't engage with GovZero. It's just they don't know it. Because a lot of the apps that GovZero created, like to let people know the budgets of, transparency of budgets and things like that, people use them, they don't know that they're part of GovZero. And I guess I thought that was very helpful because, I think in Taiwan and in everywhere you have to learn, you have to create your own democratic institutions. In America, we came out of these townships and these local government models. We've lost that. And I think a big question is some people want to go back to it. I don't think you can go back to it. What I've thought about is how do we create new ways of speaking to each other and building common ground. And as you know, I've become very interested in these things called citizens' assemblies, where you use lottery to pick like a jury, like a citizens, from all different political viewpoints, and you bring them together and you let them talk and find a consensus, find a common ground. And those have been very powerful. And so from my point of view, that's what I'm encouraging, because I think the American jury is something every American understands, to sit on a jury in a legal courtroom and with 12 other people make a judgment. Well, we're now taking the jury and making it into a political institution as opposed to a legal institution. And so I think that works for America. I don't know what works in Taiwan or in South Korea. South Korea has this amazing tradition of protest and civil disobedience through the candlelight and lights revolution. I think that's a great thing to build on. I think every country has to use its background to develop its own ideas. What do you, is that?
If you ask me about my objective opinion, my judgment, I would say difficult to have hope.
Yeah. All I can say is if you don't have hope, you're never going to get anywhere. I mean, Hannah Arendt never gave up hope, right? As bad as it gets, she said even at the height of totalitarianism in the camps, right? It's interesting, she changed her mind on this, because in Origins of Totalitarianism, she says that the camps are holes of oblivion. But at the end of Eichmann in Jerusalem, she says what we've learned over 25 years after totalitarianism is there are no holes of oblivion. There's always, the truth will always come out, and there will always be chances to start over. And that's what natality or freedom is, that we always have the ability to begin anew. And as bleak as it is, you know, I mean, her essay, like, I mean, it's just the general way she writes. They get bleaker and bleaker and bleaker, and then at the end, they always end with a ray of hope. And I don't think that's just a rhetorical device. I think it's who she is. Because if you give up hope, if you don't have hope, you can't have any possibility of freedom and future.
I think so.
Perfect. I think that's all for today.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
Great.
so much.
I'm glad. I'm really happy. This has been great. Thank you.
Thank you so much.